What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Launchpad podcast. And in this episode today, I'm interviewing Kevin and Haley from DreamMindLabs out in Colorado. They are doing extended state DMT sessions with people. And if you've listened to my podcast before, you may have heard the episode that I already did with a gentleman named Daniel McQueen, who is a part of the original sort of DMTX project, more so on the church side of things. So this is a bit of an extension of that, and there was a moment within that conversation, that original conversation that I had with Daniel, where I had really enjoyed the entire conversation up until that point, but I started probing and I directly asked him how they planned on making this technology more accessible and more affordable to more people, right? Because as it stands right now, it costs you about 10 grand and you got to get on their church monthly membership and lots of other things. But the core of that question was really like, hey, this seems like, and you guys are presenting this as a super efficacious, potentially life-changing new psychedelic technology, right? And so like, how are we going to get more people to have this experience? And the answer that I got from him just it didn't scratch the itch. There was a slight aura of gatekeeping involved, and maybe that's not the case. I'm down to learning more about the organization and the way that is run. But since then, I've had people reach out to me, and somebody who reached out to me was a member of this church and was aware of this drama and watched my interview and saw this moment where I didn't really like the answer that I got. And so he was like, hey man, just wanted to give you some insight. There's been some people break away from the church, and essentially that technology is no longer under the control and grasp of that one singular entity anymore. So that's who is on this podcast today. Kevin and Haley, the scientists who have taken this technology, started their own organization, and are truly trying to make this more accessible and more affordable for people. And so in this episode today, we talk about their experience with DMT extended state, what that's like, what it's been like watching a bunch of other people do it as well too, and kind of being the facilitator for these people. We talk about the science, the larger implications of it all, the use of it for end-of-life therapy, Danny Goler seeing the DMT code while doing extended state DMT. We really get heavily into dimethyltryptamine in this episode, and I loved it. Kevin and Haley, they have great energy. So yeah, go check out their stuff, go check out their website. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Peace out. Much love.
Well, I'm Haley. I'm a nurse working with the program within the personal use laws, and we have a DMTX program that is up and running, and we've just completed our 53rd session. So we've seen a lot of wonderful results.
Yeah, and I'm Kevin, the chemist / alchemist of the project, and it's just Haley and I that own DreamMind Laboratories, and we've been doing DMTX since early summertime of 2025.
Wow. So 53 sessions, that's incredible. I bet that's been incredible to be a part of and to witness as well too. And from my understanding from your guys' about page on your website, you yourself have had some of these extended state DMT experiences. A big smile cracked on your face when I said that, Kevin. Could you tell us, I know this is a very loaded question, you could probably talk about it all day, but briefly tell people what that is and what that is like.
Yeah, we're talking about extended state DMT, so prolonged IV infusion of DMT. And yeah, I guess I smile just because it's like right into it, right in the meat of everything. But yeah, I've had 6 extended states so far, and being the chemist, it was like always looked to me of like, hey man, you're going first and you're testing all the waters, right? So I was always in the hot seat, if you will, with different dosages, different lengths of time. And so anything from low dose to high dose and prolonged, personally, I've only gone an hour and a half. lengthwise, but no lack of profundity and depth and intensity. One of my deepest, longest experiences was only 30 minutes, quite honestly. That was like full breakthrough and hold you there, which seemed to be a very, very long period of time. The other side of that coin is I'm asked a lot is like, well, you got all the tools, you got all the medicine, like why only 6 times? And I answer that by, as far as my knowledge, there's only 2 of us in the world that have actually had this experience that many times. And the other person is Carl Hayden Smith, that was Imperial College of London's participant that like went through all of their trials. So, yeah, just to put that out there. It's a big experience, and sometimes you need a little time in between experiences. And I find so much joy, honestly. It's so humbling to just facilitate such an experience. So being able to sit back and watch, 53 sessions has been just as rewarding as having the experience myself.
Yeah. Prior to DMTX, did you have a lot of experience with other routes of administration for dimethyltryptamine, either one of you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been smoking it with Kevin for the last several years and exploring it that way, as well as intramuscular injection, which has been an interesting sort of intermediary administration method. Then I've done the DMTX once.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I've been using DMT since the early 2000s. I think I first extracted DMT in 2002, something like that. And yes, I mean, smoking for years and years. I think probably around 2017, 18 is when I first had an intravenous injection of DMT, as well as playing around with intramuscular for several years. Yeah, and then the DMTX.
Interesting, because there's this rhetoric within the DMT community that I've heard, and I also would have echoed. And this rhetoric has been around for a very long time, that it feels as if though a lot of times with these experiences, especially when you've had a beautiful sort of DMT breakthrough experience, there's this feeling when you're returning from that and you're coming back into your body, of like, wow, I can't believe it's already over. Like, there is that weird time perception thing that happens, a spectrum to it, where it's like within the experience, it can feel like a second and have lasted 9 minutes, but sometimes it can have lasted 4 minutes and feel like an eternity,
Yeah.
But there's this rhetoric that a lot of people express of like, oof, like if I could just stay in there a little bit longer, right? And there's like a lot of modalities and ways in which people have attempted to do this somewhat successfully, right? Like there's sometimes ways in which you can like slightly redose, and then there's like you can include MAOIs and synergize it with that, right? And that extends the duration.
Mm.
But what is it like watching somebody do DMT extended state, and I guess yourself doing the DMT extended state after having a lot of experience with DMT outside of that? Did it somewhat like scratch that itch in terms of like, wow, like, did you have that feeling prior to DMT extended state of like these DMT experiences that I've had so many times? Like, there's multiple instances in which could have stayed. I wish I could have stayed in there longer, and it might have been beneficial if I'd stayed in there longer. Was that some of the impotence as well too into the creation of this particular vehicle?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, we hear that from participants of, it's hard to come back. I didn't want to leave the space. And those individuals reaching out also, is that's like one of the top probably descriptive aspects of when they're filling out an application, of just like, it's always too short, and they want to come to feel that prolonged experience. Right. And yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it can feel like 2 seconds, it can feel like hours in that time frame. I remember one time I was talking to my friend in Brazil, and I was like, man, it felt like I think I was in there for 45 minutes. He's like, well, did you time it? I was like, okay, I'm going to time it next time. So I literally took out my iPhone and hit the start button, took a hit. And then when I came back out, stopped the timer. I was like, oh no, it was 7 minutes,
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, that time dilation is really interesting and fun in some aspects. But yeah, coming back from the extended state, it can, it's just such a loving energy, and it's a familiar, like like we've been there before type of experience. So like sometimes coming back does feel like, you don't want to let go of that, that grasp of that feeling. But also feeling very like blessed to come back to this world and everything we get to experience.
Yeah, and there was something really interesting you said in there. All of it was very interesting, but um, you also referred to it, that space as home, or as feeling homey, right? Um, that's another thing that's commonly expressed within the DMT community is this feeling, and of course, not every time, but I felt this as well too. This feeling, as if that place that you go to is like home. Feels realer than this reality for a lot of people, right? This place that they somehow maybe already knew, right? It feels familiar. This like gift of remembrance. Is that something that is amplified by these extended state experiences in any sort of way? Is there clarity that's brought to that question and that feeling, or yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think it really seems to be, a lot of times smoking, you get launched into the space really chaotically and quickly. And it's like you're just grasping at things that seem so tangible and real before you're being pulled back into reality. And when people go into the extended state and we get them in to a level where they're comfortable and they can explore for a little while, there's a lot of expression of gratitude and feelings of familiarity and feeling like they're home. A lot of comfort, loving, compassionate feelings. So I think it really does seem to be amplified, and it's something that people are then able to sit with for a while. And it can be hard for some people to say goodbye to that, and other people sort of reach a point where they feel like they're complete. They've got everything that they need, and they can ask to come back down.
Yeah.
So.
Wow, that's incredible. What has Kevin? You've done this 6 times now. I imagine at some point within one of those 6 times, you may have interfaced with what people refer to as like beings within these realms, right? Or entities. What is the feedback? Have you gotten any feedback directly from these entities in the other realm about your involvement with this project?
That's a great question. So what I perceive, because it hasn't been like a direct like conversation, but yes, like my big breakthrough was they celebrated, invited me into the space, and then they actually hooked me into this space. So like they confronted me with 2 IV bags of this rainbow crystalline fluid, hooked it into both of my arms and said, all right, you're one of us now. And I literally could like somatically feel it running into my physical body. So it's like I'm in there, as whatever that body is, spiritual body, in this space, in this breakthrough space, being hooked in by these green entities. And after that, like infiltrated my body, they opened up a portal and shot me deep. So yeah, they seemingly, and this has happened multiple times, not with like the IV fluid, but smoking, intramuscular sessions, etc. Like I've constantly been retold that like, yeah, you are doing the right thing, and we welcome you into this space, and constantly reinvited in, and it seems to be reassured that yeah, we're doing great work, and keep doing what you're doing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. Haley, do you have any experiences like that?
Not, I mean, well, yeah, yes, I have. I did DMTX, and when I went into the space, it felt very inviting, loving. I was held very tightly by some entities who made me feel like, this is home. We want you to come back. We want you to see more. So there was this feeling of invitation, and just it was this mutual gratitude. So, I mean, can I infer that this is something I should continue with and share? Yes, but it's not explicitly there.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the communication is not, it's contextual. It's not explicit. It's not in words. It's not limited to words, I should say. So I think we have to sort of infer meaning and, go with what feels right.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like following along that vein, do you guys, I know it's another very loaded question, but I'm full of them today with this conversation. Do you guys, and this has been debated since essentially the dawn of time, but DMT is this really interesting amplification of it. But do you guys think that these experiences are primarily sort of endogenously created, or do you think that we're tapping into something else when we have these DMT experiences?
Yeah, wow. I mean, very, very loaded question. I always tended to be rather skeptical in previous experience with psychedelics. I always sort of believed like, oh, this is all coming from my own brain, my own experiences. I'm creating all of this in some amazing way. But DMT convincingly seems to launch one into another dimension, and the things that you see and experience seem like they would be impossible to be endogenously produced, at least in their entirety. And
Yeah.
I think there's quite a bit of literature by some very well-educated people pointing at that as well. So,
Yeah, I mean, I do buy into what Andrew Gallimore is talking about. That this is real. Almost like that switch, right? Like, is our brain creating it? Sure, but that doesn't mean that it's not coming from an external source. I kind of buy into that for sure. I mean, the entities are definitely autonomous. The space is definitely unlike anything. I think we've even shown through research now with like what Imperial did with fMRI information is like the brain does not look like it does when it's dreaming. It does not look like when it's awake. So it's definitely a different state of mind that we're experiencing. Only once have I truly had like an out of body experience in the DMT state where I actually left my body, and I didn't go far. I was like sitting behind ourselves, but that was only one time I've actually had that. So even in the deepest states of the extended state is like, there's a dual agency, which we can get into later, but where you're completely attached to your physical self, but you're still experiencing something other. So it's like, yeah, it's like my consciousness is having this experience outside of like normal waking or even sleeping consciousness. But yeah, it's a loaded question, hard to answer. It's hard to put words to that, but it does seem to be other, like, it's opening up a channel or something that we're unable to generally tune into.
it feels like you're opening up the doors of perception.
Yeah.
Like all of this is around us at all times. It's just our lack of ability to perceive it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. With like, so this is also something that is debated quite a bit, but I want to kind of fill you guys out now that you've had these experiences and walk people through these types of experiences. But it's sometimes expressed that, especially with the sort of quote unquote psychedelic renaissance that we're having here within Western culture with Westernized people, it's sometimes expressed that sometimes these psychedelic experiences are dangerous for people in the way that it opens them up to a spiritual world and a spiritual reality that maybe they're not ready for. And there isn't the right sort of like societal matrix and things like that around them that would facilitate them going on that journey. And so you hear people like relate this to like Kundalini awakenings and things like that all the time, right? Um, Something that Daniel was expressing about the DMTX to me within our conversation was that he felt as if though it was a safer sort of route of administration for a lot of people in the way in which you can kind of get people in there, right? Technology, the way he was describing it to me is that you can very precisely dial somebody into that place, but if they're having a bad experience, dial them back. Whereas with traditional routes of administration, if you launch somebody in there and they're having a really bad experience, it's like you kind of have to sit it out for 15, 20 minutes and then we'll, you
Right.
know, but the DMTX technology, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but he said that you can bring them back almost instantaneously or within a few seconds, few moments. And that seems to lend itself to potentially being less harmful, right? Um, I, I don't know where I fully lie on this question of like, I don't think that psychedelics are bad, right? I don't. I think they're actually incredibly beautiful, but I do think that there is some truth, not in a gatekeeping type of way, right? But I do think that there is some truth, and I've seen it before, where people open themselves up in this really aggressive, explosive way, and there's kind of like this aftermath, a bit, but. I say all that just to ask you, like, do you think that the DMT extended state technology lends itself to having less of these sort of like episodes and people having these spiritual sort of crises, psychosis, whatever you want to call it? And where do you lie in this question of like, do you think people should have to sweep the ashram for 30 years, or do you think God gave us this sort of technology for a reason to utilize respectfully? Yeah, what do you think, man?
I mean, I think that well, based on just objectivity, like what we observed, when somebody is going into the space and initially it's too intense, we can dial it back. We can also, as in traditionally administered psychedelics, we can sit with them, offer support, a hand on their shoulder, or just we've got you, and get them through a challenging area. But then there's a lot of truth to that. If it is difficult and they're very uncomfortable, we can dial it down. They don't have to sit with that. They don't have to go through it in the same way you would with like a mushroom trip or ayahuasca. And so we can really fine tune it to get people into a space that is comfortable and more conducive to an overall positive experience. So I feel like that's incredibly beneficial. I mean, there is something to be said for working through struggles, through challenges, and confronting difficulties, and people do that. But it doesn't have to be this painfully drawn out experience with DMTX.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Haley answered it beautifully. The technology does allow us that control, right? I mean, I don't want to, control is a bad word because we can't control someone's experience, but we can offer a gentler experience going into the state as well as coming out of the state. So, what you stated is absolutely true with the technology. Now, it's probably not for everybody. Just because we have the ability to aid in somebody's experience, like going slower or pulling them out if they're not ready to go through that struggle, doesn't necessarily mean that, I mean, psychedelics are for everyone, right? I mean, if somebody does have a predisposition to psychological breaks just on their own, any psychedelics, regardless of the
Duration
or administration, yeah, it might not be for them. And, we do at least talk to people around that topic when we're having initial conversations with people. Currently it seems to be very healthy people coming to us, and we're not doing psychological therapy with the extended state. So in that aspect, it's been incredibly safe. And, people do push themselves. I mean, like Haley said, I mean, coming and working through challenges can be incredibly beneficial. But being able to also control the dosage through an experience like that can be maybe an aided benefit compared to like you slug down a certain amount of ayahuasca and like hold on, no matter what. Now, in those cultural contexts, it's amazing what those shamans can do with Icaros and things like that and aid people through that. You know what I mean? So this is just different. It's a different administration method all around. And yeah.
Different modality, different time commitment, different sort of integration. So, I think it all has its place. And it's not to, dismiss the long struggles that you might encounter in a psilocybin come up, and some of the the internal demons that you might have to confront to get through that experience, because that's powerful too.
It's interesting. It's interesting you say that word, quote unquote demons. This is another question I kind of wanted to ask you guys. This is something, it's only been here as of honestly recently, maybe in the past year or so, but maybe around 2016, a little bit earlier on than that, but 2016, 2017, 2018, psychedelics in general started catching a lot of attention, and DMT has been put onto a lot of people's radar that it wouldn't have been before. And I've heard some mainstream media sources sparsely over the past year or so, but it feels like it's picked up a little bit, this rhetoric. There is this question, and it usually seems to come from people who don't have a lot of experience with DMT, but there seems to be this question and this idea of you're potentially opening yourself up to, like you said, Haley, quote unquote, demons or bad dark energies. What do you guys think of that when in the context of DMT?
When I mention demons, it's in reference to internally generated experiences and negative feelings. Yes, I've also heard this in reference from other people to potentially external forces. There's a lot of energy around us in the world, and I think it's all just dependent on the individual whether we contextualize something as negative or positive. But what I've observed and what I've experienced in the DMT space is nothing is malicious. It can be neutral. It can feel pretty chaotic. It can feel compassionate, loving, but yet to encounter anything that truly feels like malicious in any way.
Yeah, can a giant mantis being feel
intimidating?
Yeah, of course, or you might just have internal fears around certain like spidery looking acrobatic beings, or the mantis beings, or a dragon or something, or even being like dissected or eaten. But believe it or not, we've had all of those happen in sessions, and generally people are laughing and just like, wow, my heart's being ripped out right now. And they're just like really like vibing with the experience. But, it's a question that's come up with certain individuals about entity attachment, like putting a negative connotation to like, am I going to leave this space and this entity is not going to leave me, or something like that, kind of like a demonic possession type of like scenario. And I do think it is the mainstream talking negatively, not unlike, I'm an 80s kid with Dare, right? Not unlike that kind of talk and stuff that gets put on this. And we've just seen the opposite. Like Haley said, we've seen nothing but benevolent entities, loving experiences. Can they be a little challenging at first if something jumps up in your forefront? Sure. But if you're willing to just talk about it through the experience, and sometimes they're just checking you out. And if you confront that or have the ability to confront it, usually it's just like, oh, okay, on you go in the experience. And it's not a big deal, and we're here to help with that, of course, when those type of situations come up. But it's never been a negative experience in any sort of way. Yeah.
It often feels as if, coming from this space that seems to be enlightened and sort of beyond human emotion, that the negativity that we confront with this or any other psychedelic work, or even just breath work or meditation or psychological deep dive, sitting with yourself, the negativity stems from, our own perceptions and beliefs and just human emotion.
Yeah.
Not necessarily from space.
Yeah, I've intuitively leaned towards that as well too. This feeling as if though, like you said, Haley, that it's kind of like this amplification of what's going on internally, and because there is like that amplification, the end result a lot of times is like this sort of uh, maybe like fried nervous system trauma, things like that, right? And I think that a lot of times instead of sort of taking accountability, like that was my own mind that I was interfacing with, or my own, quote unquote demon, it might be easier to attach it to something else, right? External from yourself. And also sometimes I think there's just like a gatekeeping aspect to it too, because some of these people that I've heard pass on this rhetoric don't sound like super experienced psychonauts, and so it's interesting to hear someone have such strong opinions of that, and such a strong opinion that would deter others from trying it, and yet you yourself had to interface with this thing a whole lot. That to me is really curious. But yeah. So another thing that you had kind of said, Kevin, and like stopped yourself, was you're like, we can kind of like control. You're like, well, we could somewhat control this experience via the titration, the dosage, and technology, right? But I remember from my experience with Daniel, something that he was describing to me is, and this is something people report with normal routes of administration with DMT as well, but this phenomenon of people taking a large enough dose, yet getting what they described as getting like blocked out from the space. It's maybe not necessarily bad. It's not good. It's just like this very clear, like almost feels as if though they have been blocked from that space. Have you guys seen this at all with DMT extended state?
Not locked out. We had one of our I think it was our last session actually is it's about after 45 minutes or something. Is that right? She basically just said, well, I got all the information I needed. And they said, well, that's enough time. So why don't you get out? So they like kind of kicked her out, but they gave her like a beautiful message. She had a beautiful experience, but then they were just kind of like done with her and like kicked her out, So, yeah, I mean, that's happened a couple of times as far as that goes, kind of in a humorous way. Like I'm laughing about it because they were laughing as well. Just like, oh, they just told me to leave, I guess my time is up, Yeah. But to mention, like, we've had a couple of abnormalities, let's say, with certain individuals. And I think this leads more to maybe like personal tolerance or something with DMT, where it's like, there comes a time in the space, and it has nothing to do with the entities, where it's like, it does not matter how much DMT we give them, they're not going any further. So could that be a level of lockout, or is it personal tolerance or something? But it's also something we've just observed over a certain amount of time, a little bit dose dependent. Like you hit that 2-3 hour range, and it's like you come into a different level of the experience where you're now like kind of outwardly processing the experience. Like we could be talking just like we are now, and they're getting a incredibly high dose of DMT infused into them. And I don't know, maybe Haley has a better way to describe it, but there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it. And it's like 1% of the people we do, it's just like they hit this time frame and they're just like, give me more. And it's like, I literally don't know if I can give you any more. You know what I mean? You're not going anywhere. It's kind of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
within
go ahead.
We've seen some of the subjective tolerance, but I think there's also just a level of, when people go in really deep, it's almost like coming full circle. They go through the crazy visuals, they go through the entities, they go to this place beyond, to their breakthrough state. And then there's almost this feeling of sobriety. And like we had one participant who said, I'm completely sober, but then he alternately would say, I'm completely fucked up. But yet he was talking as if he was sober, and he was very, very clear and even able to take his eye shades off and acknowledge that, there was still a lot going on, but there's also the subjective feeling of sobriety and no longer, and I guess being in a sense beyond the psychedelic experience that has such an impact on your perception and your cognitive function. So
Yeah.
it's interesting to see this.
Wow. That's so interesting. Thank you guys for articulating that, because I didn't get that from Daniel. This sort of like sobriety space that people end up entering into, this somewhat plateau zone. Because what he articulated to me was just the part about people getting blocked out sometimes, and he said it was very few, but he didn't articulate this kind of like sobriety zone where it's almost as if though there's been a completeness to it, like a sort of resolution. And that's
Yes.
interesting, because I was having a talk with a gentleman. He has a really large YouTube channel. His name's Rob, Adeptus Psychonautica. He's made a lot of content about DMT. He was kind of like one of the early YouTube DMT guys but this was something he was telling me one time, that he feels like a large part of the therapeutic nature of dimethyltryptamine experiences is this sharp feeling of like, even if it doesn't completely make sense, but like when you come back, if you've had a good experience, there's this feeling of like resolution, right? Even if it happened in a matter of eternity or a moment, right? There's like this, you went through something, this hero's journey, and there's like this aha, there's a clicking, there's love involved, there's going back home, and then there's like this reset button going back into the physical body, like this weird resolution that you can't always fully articulate. So that's really beautiful to hear that this kind of technology more often seems to bring people to kind of like this resolution, if you will. That's really, really cool.
I think also, just to go back to that comparison with Daniel's description, being present for virtually all of those sessions as well, I think that also evolving from that in our own practice, he didn't let people sit in that state. The way those sessions were orchestrated through his protocol didn't allow people to reach some of the same states or levels that we've been able to experiment with.
Yeah.
Interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
I mean, it just really has to do with how we run the protocol more than anything, and we can touch on that if you'd like. But ultimately, it's like we're trying to fine tune, and we pride ourselves on individualization. I'm going to word as best as I can today, and finding what we call a cruising altitude for everybody, right? Because everybody's dose and experience is so different. So fine tuning that for each individual is something that we're really just dialing in. And so not sticking to one protocol, not thinking that everybody is the same, but really getting the feedback from the individual and the experience to get them into a state. So like, to hit on what she's stating is that we're constantly fine tuning, even if that means we need to take a break with somebody, right? Like bring them completely down to baseline and like, okay, let's regroup here and get you back in a different way, right? Has just really allowed people to get to that state we were talking about. Yeah.
That's really interesting, and it makes sense. There would be an individualization. I also struggle with that word, individualization needed for each person. That's just, it seems like somewhat common sense, but as we have gotten more and more into this exploration of the spirit world as Westerners, that seems to be clear to a lot of people and a lot of good facilitators that I meet and things. It's like, it is about a lot of times the individual, meeting them where they're at. And so it makes sense, even with a technology like DMTX that seems to be super efficacious and safe and all the things, that there would still need to be individualization for the person. Wow, interesting. So the future of all of this, guys, where do you see it going? What with the DMT extended state technology in particular? What are your guys' sort of current plans? Do you just plan to uh, do you have any plans of expansion, of making it more accessible? Or are you just kind of doing boots on the ground, collecting research, doing what you can? Yeah, tell me what your guys' big plans are, this sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess all the above. We can each kind of hit on those aspects, but yeah, all the above. I mean, we're in the trenches, right? So we're kind of the grinders, grassroots. It's not like we have funding or anything. We're working out of our home and have a beautiful ceremonial space. We're not some big clinic or something like that. So, to some aspect, we're already incredibly affordable. But that could still be a broader reach. And we've had some really influential people come through and give us really amazing advice of how to get there. And some of that is just those that can afford to pay more to give back to those that can't is one way to make it accessible. And I think that's a really beautiful way of looking at just energy as a whole and not necessarily monetary. Those that have energy can give back to those that don't have so much energy. And we've done sessions for free, and we've also done sessions for prominent people that are willing to pay a little bit more. Right. So that's one way of like looking at it.
We've also worked with a palliative care patient, virtually a free session, just because this was an individual who was interested, able to consent, cognitively intact, but he and his palliative care doctor requested this service, and it's something that we would really like to be able to expand on and offer in a greater capacity, but we really can't do this for free. So it would be a goal of ours in the future to actually create a fund so that this is something that could be expanded in an accessible way, and see more of these beautiful experiences and give people some quality into their life. Just really trying to get it out there and make this as accessible as possible.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, we're collecting data and we consider ourselves open source. So, Lucis Mind that's getting ready to open up, I believe in March. We've been talking to their owners as well as Andrew Gallimore, and we share all the information that we're finding. I think what's really important around all of this is that the information is shared, our observations are shared, our data is shared, and it's more about I don't find that the island paradise of a Lucis Mind is like competition to us, right? It's really about it's amazing what they're going to be doing and the access that they have and the research they're going to have. But yeah, I mean, you can come to us or you can go to the island and have that bougie vacation. But ultimately, can we just make DMTX technology safest it can be and the best experience it can be? And the only way we can do that is share information, right? And
I mean, to that point, we also invite people to bring in their own ideas for research or experiments to our space. And so, we're willing and able to facilitate. We've collected DDG, EEG data. We've contributed quite a bit to Danny Goler's laser experimentation, which is a fun, wonderful project to be part of. But
I was wondering when that was going to get brought up today.
It actually
brought it up.
It gets brought up almost every session that we do, and we can incorporate different experiments and ideas into our sessions, which I think can help broaden our reach as well.
Yeah, I mean, collaboration, I guess, is the key word there, right? We really do pride ourselves in collaborating with as many individuals as we possibly can, because there's no idea that's a bad idea. And so many people, like with Danny, for example, we reached out to him and it was just, how can we help you? And ultimately it was like, well, an extended state looking at a laser for 5 hours is how you can help me. He was like,
Cool.
sure. All right, let's do that.
Man, what was that like with Danny?
Yeah.
Oh, it was great.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Man, what an amazing team he's got. Brought his film crew, brought Sterling Cooley, a researcher who's studying microtubules and has a DDG brain scan machine. So he set up and was looking at the feedback from that while we were doing the lasers. And first we encouraged Danny to go into a really deep space and just really have that deep personal DMTX experience. And then after about an hour or so, we went into lasers and linguistics and DDG experimentation. And so
yeah, it was great.
It was so much fun.
Danny's great. And, we still work with Danny on so many different levels. His team sent us a whole box of lasers and, believe it or not, like it's almost been every single person that's come here since Danny has been here wants to look at the lasers at some point. And almost 100% success, quite honestly, unless people are just like, not into it. Like, all right, cool. There's a laser. Like, I'm on DMT, but like, not my thing right now, but yeah, no, he was great. And, another way to like give back is, we have a 501c3 nonprofit, federally, and also does Danny. So people he directly sends to us, then we redonate some of those funds back to Danny. So it's just like a circular helping situation.
And his fund, to be clear, is to support homelessness. I don't know the entire context of how he does that, but yeah, I mean, it's great. I think this is all about, connecting humanity. That's the overwhelming message that everyone is receiving is, how can we be more human?
Yeah. And our nonprofit is around sustainability and education of ethnobotanicals. And just, I've been a plant medicine person for most of my life. I grew up in a farm in Ohio. Plants and animals have been incredibly important to me. So our house is surrounded with Mimosa hostilis and San Pedro. And I've been a mushroom and cannabis grower for 25 years. So it's just like, it's really important to me that we connect with these plants and, work with them in so many different modalities.
Yeah. I always found the Danny thing, the DMT laser experiment, so incredibly interesting. And it seems like it's been really popular. And I remember one time I made this video on TikTok, just talking about the secret language, the language that Allison Gray has painted for a long time, that lots of other visionary artists have painted as well too. These kind of like alien-like hieroglyphic symbols that people see within these spaces, with the entire DMT laser thing is centered around. But I made this video talking about the phenomenon, and it was so like there was probably 3, 4, 5,000 people within the comments talking about their own experiences seeing this as well too. And it doesn't always require the laser either, right? Like it's the laser seems to more reliably pull this out of people and produce this. But I've seen it. I've actually never done the laser. Danny's told me, tried to get me to do it a couple times now, but it hasn't lined up just in terms of our like schedules and stuff. I love Danny, but I do plan to do that with him, and maybe one day we'll do the extended state laser as well. But I've seen this code outside of that for a long time. And so I don't know, what do you guys think that language is? Why do you think we see that? Some people try and explain it from the materialistic standpoint of it's our brain's interpretation center for language and linguistics or something, but that doesn't seem to fully scratch the itch for me.
No, I don't know. I mean, I've seen the Allison Gray like alien hieroglyphics in the DMT state and some of my deep dives with the extended state. But the code with the laser is different than that. And that's one aspect that's interesting. So like, first that's what I thought, is maybe the code is just going to look like what I've already seen, but it is different. And it has like weird object permanency, meaning like it's like shining a flashlight on a wall. So it's like it's illuminating something that's not always there, and you can move your head around and it doesn't go anywhere. And if you go up and down with the laser, the code changes. Like it's permanently there in our reality, but we need that laser to shine it on there. And why DMT aids in that, I don't know. But you're right. I mean, I haven't personally, but we had somebody on that came to do a psilocybin session with us that saw the code as well in the laser. And there's been a lot of reports on other medicines as well as without the medicines seeing the code. So it is interesting. I don't know. What do you?
I mean, it just brings up more questions than answers. It's absolutely there. It's amazing to see. It's like shining a light into a dark room. Everything seems to have its place. And the film guy for Danny asked me to sketch some of what I had seen, and then he immediately sent me back a collection of other sketches that people had sent him. And one of the characters seems to be the same pretty universally. So that makes you go, wow, there is something more here. All these people looking at the laser, repeating this experiment. At some point, someone's actually going to be able to bring some information back, make this relevant. But I mean, for now, it's super cool, and who knows what it is.
I can't wait to see how that evolves over the course of our life. I mean, all of it is going to evolve in a really interesting way. But so one thing you had mentioned earlier, Haley, was utilizing DMTX for somebody within palliative care. Can you tell me what palliative care is? Is that end of life care?
Well, palliative care is not necessarily end of life, but usually it's, when somebody has a condition that no longer can be medically improved upon or really treated in a curative sense. And so palliative focuses on quality of life, often involves, a lot of people think of opiates and lots of pain medication. And so that's definitely part of it, because it's a point when, you just want to make sure somebody is as comfortable and can get the most out of their life as possible. Hospice, on the other hand, is typically available when somebody, based on their diagnosis and normal disease progression, has 6 months or less to live. They don't necessarily only live that long. Sometimes people are on hospice for several years. So there's a lot of overlap in the palliative and hospice, but regardless of whether it's palliative or hospice, it's focused on quality of life. And a lot of times, people are facing a lot of psychological, emotional issues, as are their families. I mean, there's a lot of struggle to be a caregiver. There's a lot of struggle to deal with your own mortality and all the regimens that you have to employ on a daily basis just to function and just to live. So, there's a lot of psychiatric medication that's used and therapy. And I think that with the right patients, the right family, the right support, DMTX or other psychedelics are being shown to be just wonderfully valuable in these settings. Well, I mean, DMTX obviously only we've done that as far as I know, but psilocybin is gaining popularity, and everyone is starting to acknowledge the value of psychedelics in general. But I'm hoping DMTX can fit into this in a bigger way.
I agree. It seems to me that it might potentially do just that, Haley, what you just said. Do this, but in a bigger way. I reflect back on, and this is definitely something covered by the mainstream media as well too, but the research that has been done on the use of psilocybin for people near the end of life sort of therapy for people with psilocybin, and they had, of course, these miraculous results that lasted for people for months or maybe even years, and that makes sense as somebody who has also benefited from psilocybin. Um, but it feels like to me as if though and everyone's going to be different. Some people might, truly benefit a little bit more maybe from the psilocybin, but there's going to be a lot of people who would even benefit that much more with this DMTX technology for lots of reasons, the depth that it gives you, but also like, ooh, I think about the potential of, somebody having maybe one of these uh, nervous system frying, traumatizing experiences at the end of life. That wouldn't be super great. But with DMTX, that brings the chances of that down, um, even much more so. And it was interesting hearing you talk and articulate um, palliative care, because something that came to mind for me is like I was thinking about the use of DMTX for hospice and end of life, and it just makes sense from all sorts of different angles why it'd be beneficial, right? And I think a lot of that is centered around people's sort of psychological mind space going into that death portal and what it could potentially do for them. I think that's where like my mind was centered around a lot of that. When you brought up palliative care, something that came to my mind is I remember an experience that I had one time on dimethyltryptamine where I had this long reoccurring sort of agitation, inflammation, and problem with my left lower back that was weirdly addressed within the experience. And not that I have had no issues, do a lot of yoga and stuff now, but like it, it it's weirdly somatically healed me in this like of course it and I say vision, but like it was this synesthetic coming together of thoughts and feelings and all sorts of different things. But what it presented to me was different, but the end result was like this somatic healing to my physical body. And I think about people within palliative care and certain conditions, like you said, Haley, where we're just kind of like at the end of what we can potentially do for them. It seems like so incredibly beautiful, and like a lot of potential.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think not all of that is just in your mind when that's happening, because there is also research that's being done on the like physical benefits of DMT, like in the context of stroke or brain injury. There's a lot of anti-inflammatory action that can happen. And when you're completely saturating your system through IV administration, could this be amplified? Possibly. I mean, the potential for medical use is huge, and there's research that's being done. But we're working strictly in personal use space, so it's great to acknowledge that and see it, and hopefully at some point be able to offer it in conjunction with medical treatments.
Yeah, I mean, you asked that question earlier, and I guess I didn't completely finish like that part of the conversation. But one thing looking to the future, what I would love to work with as well. I mean, the palliative care end of life, of course, I think could be. I've had experiences where it seemed like I was coming back from death, that rebirth, just like a new perspective on like how I would want to leave this world, right? Surrounded by family and friends and just a loving environment, But we're also working and talking with the Cluster Busters group and Andre Gomez's group, Cluster Free. So that's around cluster headaches. And DMT is becoming really popular in those groups of helping cluster headaches. And something that, we just haven't been able to explore, but could a prolonged, really low dose of extended DMT be helpful for those patients? Getting a flood of DMT, and could that give them maybe a prolonged relief from their cluster headaches, rather than toking on a DMT pen when they have them, but could you actually interfere with those headaches for a little bit of a time? We don't know, but there's a lot of medical possibilities, like Haley said, to be researched, to look at, and off doing actual medical trials, because that's not what we're doing. We're doing exploratory trials. But if someone like that would come and do a low dose, like, would we get a report that it really helped? It's something really interesting in this realm,
Yeah, that would be incredible. I have seen that where it seems like almost the life-saving medicine for a lot of people, and there's various different psychedelics that people have used for the cluster headache thing, but the utilization of low dose DMT there has been a really popular one. It seems like. Um, can you tell me about your research into yeast and DMT?
East DMT, yeah. So it's been an idea of mine for a really long time. My background professionally was in molecular biology and genetics. So it's right up my alley of genetically modifying a yeast organism to produce DMT. And there's actually a company in San Diego who's already done this, and they're more leaning towards the production of cannabinoids and psilocybin at this point, just because that's kind of the head of like therapy. So I think the DMT yeast is on the back burner, but it's not something that already hasn't been done. They don't have a patent on it or anything, but my research on that is really just my own interest in it. And the idea would be splicing a gene out of Mimosa hostilis and interjecting it into the yeast. And for it to start from feeding the yeast tryptophan, going along the normal biological pathway from tryptophan to tryptamine to DMT. So
Wow.
it's starting by testing mimosa plants and mimosa bark. And there's a lab here in Colorado called Triptomics, which does a beautiful analytical work and doing some of that work. And it's pretty easy nowadays to order genetic material and do this work. Takes a little scaling on my part, but it's definitely possible and it'd be interesting. And really, it wouldn't be for any scale or anything. For me, it would just be pulling it off. If I could get a yeast to produce a couple grams of DMT, I think it'd be pretty amazing. And it's pretty funny too. Like in an aspect of like, if you look on the war on drugs, it's like if I could hand you off just a packet of yeast and you could throw it in a bucket of water and tryptophan and produce, endless supplies of DMT. Like, what's the government going to do with that? So
Yeah, that was definitely going to be one of my questions for you. Is like, what is the intention of this? And you beautifully already answered it. I imagine that would be incredibly most satisfying, but also it'd be telling. There'd probably be something interesting we would learn within that path of yeast producing its own dimethyltryptamine. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this church, this project, but it somewhat reminds me of, and I know that it's different, but it somewhat reminds me of, have you heard of silomethoxin?
yeah.
Churches?
Mhm.
Yeah. In the conversation I had with them, if I'm recalling it correctly, it is supposedly when you feed this 5-MeO DMT to the substrate of the psilocybin mushrooms, there's like this sort of synthetic biology going on where it's like the mushrooms are 4-hydroxylating this 5-MeO DMT. That's what they say at the church, and creating the silomethoxin, the 4-hydroxy 5-MeO DMT. Haley, I see you looking at Kevin in a funny way. I can't wait for this response. Kevin, what do you think of this silomethoxin as a scientist yourself who's thrown yourself into these things? Have you ever tried silomethoxin?
I have not. I don't know if I want to be careful about this. Like, I mean, I can only go off information that I've received as well. Andrew Gallimore commented on this as well as a third-party analytical lab, I believe over in Europe, tested mushrooms from that church and found that there actually was 0 silomethoxin present. And this sparked a ton of controversy. So I can't speak to it like personally, although I just will say like this was a hypothesis that Sasha Shulgin came up with, that we could potentially have nature bioengineer something novel. Is that molecule a real molecule? Yes. But where I started down that pathway is that I could find no analytical standard anywhere in the world. So there was no certified reference material. So meaning that it hadn't been synthesized that you could throw in an HPLC or run on a mass spec to kind of see based on a standard that it's present or not. Now, however, as an analytical chemist, like you can look at an HPLC chromatogram or you can look at a mass spec and know whether it's there. And clearly it was not when these mushrooms from the church was tested. So
Yeah.
now, as a mycologist and growing mushrooms for 25 years, I tried, because there was a research paper, I think written in the 50s, that I was following of feeding tryptophan to my substrate, to just psilocybe, genus mushrooms, and it killed my mycelium. Now, this was like very like basic tests that I was doing, and maybe my concentration that I was feeding to my substrate was too much, and I actually was feeding it directly mycelium on agar plates, and it just was not accepting it. It was mutating mycelium and not, boosting my psilocybin content. So from my own little experiments that, again, I could have been screwing up based on the concentration I was feeding them. I don't know, and like my biggest thing is like, why would you be wasting 5-MeO trying to make this novel molecule more than anything? It's such a beautiful molecule on its own. But those are my two cents.
And this is something I could never get from them clearly, was at what ratio, like how much 5-MeO DMT do you have to use to make X amount of silomethoxin? That was something that was never clear to me. I don't know if that's information I don't want to necessarily disclose. But yeah, I'm with you. If it's like maybe you utilize 25 milligrams and it ends up helping you make a half ounce of silent, maybe, but I don't think that the ratios are going to be like that. Just intuitively, I feel like it's probably, like you said, Kevin, to some degree, maybe wasteful. But also but I go back and forth so much with the silomethoxin thing. Just slightly in part because that was a big part of their story, right? With analytical tests that were done by a third party that showed no sign of the silomethoxin that they had been claiming. But then they had some whole rebuttal where it was because, I think, and you had articulated this a minute ago, that there was no sort of like standards ways yet in which you were actually able to test for it, and the way that they went about it was wrong. And there was like some long drawn out court case around it as well too. But I don't think there's been like, still to date up until this point, any confirmed, measurable analytical data showing it, even though they've been saying for a very long time that that's coming. We're working on that. But at the same time, like you said, it was something that Shulgin kind of theorized and thought might be possible himself, something that Hamilton Morris himself says that he's on the fence about. He thinks that it might be possible, but he's, doesn't know for sure. I kind of wanted to pick your brain about it, since you're diving into like this yeast DMT stuff. I thought you might have some interesting takes on it. And like, look, I took it myself to try it on several occasions. I tried it with a few friends. My girlfriend's tried it. Everyone that I've tried it with says essentially the same thing and it's so hard to tell. Like, it feels very, very similar. And there's like these slight differences and things that people point out. I even brought up that every psilocybin experience to me feels different subjectively, even if it's the same batch grown,
Right.
in the same box, right? And if I'm taking the same amount. And so, yeah, I found it to be attached to that is this whole phenomenon of the group itself and their following that regularly buys and consume and talks about the benefits of this quote unquote silomethoxin. It's like, either there's something there or there's not. And there's this really large, weird kind of social phenomenon that is played out because of it as well too, that we could probably learn from in a few ways.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, it could be, and I'm just stating this, it could be, yes, just a phenomenon that's a gigantic placebo effect that, you buy into a belief of something that's been sold to you, and it just takes a life of its own. And, it's hard for me to say because I haven't taken it, but it just seems like from, some people that have done the testing and really looked at this, that, I think it just needs to be viewed as a skepticism. But I also got to be careful, because people that are having these conversations were part of that defamation case, right? I mean, the church went after anybody who was speaking about this in a negative way because of the loss of income that they had. But there was also something in that defamation case that was pointed out, and Andrew Gallimore pointed it and highlighted this, posted it all over Instagram and social media, that they were also stating that it had to be tested only with their holy water. And that's the only way you could extract the cyclomethoxin to have analytical tests be accurate. And that's just because the standard by the lab that tested it used methanol and not holy water. And first and foremost, like if you know anything about analytical chemistry, that's just not how it's done. We use methanol and HPLC machines. That's just how it's done, right? So it's just like it's a laughing matter that they tried to use ill science to show how it had to be proven through analytical methods. It's just like there was just a lot of that case, and I don't think we'll ever see anything from it. It would take, to make that molecule is pretty in depth to like synthesize that molecule. So like somebody would need to do that first. I think it has been done, but yeah,
a French chemist.
Yeah.
It was like a French chemist guy who had apparently done it. He has like a published synthesis on it. Yeah, man. Thank you for that. I really wanted to kind of pick your brain about that. I just found it so incredibly interesting. Okay, guys. Well,
and on that, eh?
yeah. Yeah. Cool. Is there anything else that you would like to say to the audience today? Is there anything any other areas that you'd like to touch on before we peace out of here?
No, I don't think so. It's been a great conversation. Great meeting you. I really appreciate you bringing us on and talking about everything. It's always an honor and privilege, and feel humbled to speak about this amazing work we're doing. Yeah, it's really been a calling and beautiful work. So
I feel incredibly blessed to talk to you guys. How can people support you within your endeavor?
They can reach out at DreamMindLabs.com. If anyone's interested, they can go through our website, and we love talking to people about what we're doing.
Yeah, DreamMindLabs on Instagram, and I think it's just DreamMind on X, but DreamMindLabs as well. So social media, feel free to reach out. Our website, it's DreamMindLabs@gmail.com for an email address. And yeah, happy to talk anything and everything with anybody about all this work. It's really awesome.